Hey everyone, how are you? This is Brandon Wolf. I am the Media Relations Manager here at Equality Florida. I use he, him pronouns, and I am really excited about tonight. I'm excited to welcome you to this virtual Equality Connection. It's an opportunity for us to join together to mark 4 years since the tragedy at Pulse. It's an opportunity for us to talk about the work that's been done, to talk about the work that's ahead. But before I dive all the way in, I did just want to give a couple of ground rules or housekeeping items. This is, although I know all of you would rather just listen to me talk for 90 minutes straight with no break, this really is a connection. It's about engaging with folks. It's about giving us a space to grieve, to mourn, to do all of the things that involve a commemoration. And it's also about helping us to create a path forward for each other together. So I encourage everyone, if you can, jump into the comment section, give a thumbs up, give a heart, whatever feels good in the moment, and introduce yourself. Tell us your pronouns, tell us where you're hailing from, and get to know people in the chat. My hope is that tonight you leave inspired. Tonight you leave humbled and honored by the work that's being done. And I also hope that you leave with a new sense of connection to your community. I hope that you leave today with a new path forward that you can, embark on with all of these folks that you've met here. The other piece of housekeeping that I would give you is that if you happen to have to dip out early or you feel totally inspired by the message tonight, please know that tonight's town hall, tonight's Remembrance Connection event will be available on Equality Florida's Facebook page, as well as our YouTube page as well. So please take a look at that, keep your eyes peeled. And again, this really is about connection. So I'm looking forward to everyone jumping into the comments. I'm looking forward to reading what you have to say. And of course, if you've got questions, if you've got things, leave them in there as well. Our fabulous producer, Michael Womack, is on the line. And so he's going to be able to interact with you and hopefully share information. We've got folks on staff. I see Wes, I see Todd, I see Mark. Everybody's on the line. So we've got lots of folks here to help you engage around the work. I'm really looking forward to connecting with all of you tonight. Listen, Friday marks 4 years since the tragedy at Pulse nightclub. And I don't have to tell you that it was a brutal act of hatred. A man filled to the brim with that hatred, armed with weapons of war, walked into Pulse nightclub and murdered 49 largely LGBTQ people of color. And when we set up this town hall event, we wanted to provide space to talk about that. We wanted to provide space to reflect and remember 4 years later. We wanted to provide an opportunity to share the work that's being done to honor those 49 victims with action. But when we put this event together, I don't think we realized just how timely that message would be. One of the victims that lost their lives that night was my best friend, Drew Leinanen. A few days after the shooting, I remember us holding a memorial service in downtown Orlando. The church was beautiful. It was packed with people who loved him. And I had the distinct honor and pleasure of helping to walk Drew's casket down the aisle. I remember clinging to the side of that casket, not wanting to let go. I remember getting to the end of the aisle and thinking that I couldn't let my hands off the bar until I'd found the right way to say goodbye. And so there at the front of that church, I whispered under my breath that I would never stop fighting for a world that Drew would be proud of. And that mirrors the promise that the team at Equality Florida made in the aftermath of Pulse. We promised that we would not just go after justice on a surface level, that we would not just set our sights on bits and pieces of equality, but that we would commit every fiber of our being to uprooting hate and bigotry at its source. If we are going to talk about a world that Drew would be proud of, if we're going to talk about a world that the other 48 victims of Pulse would be proud of, then we have to talk about a world where we are truly uprooting that hatred and bigotry. A world where everyone, no matter who you are, no matter how you look, how you love, gets the same dignity and respect as everyone else, the dignity and respect that they deserve. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, the countless Black trans women who lose their lives every single day in this country. Our fight to resist violence, to push back against bigotry and hatred, that is a fight that means honoring them with action too. If we're serious about creating that world that the 49 victims of Pulse would be proud of, if we're serious about creating a better future for the next generation of LGBTQ young people, then we are called upon to transform the grief and the pain that we felt 4 years ago, the same grief and pain that we feel today, into action, an action that pushes back against hate of all kinds. So tonight, we're going to have an opportunity to chat with leaders across the state of Florida that are doing the work of honoring those victims with action. We're going to talk about how you can engage with that work of honoring the victims with action. We're going to talk about the path forward and what justice really looks like. But before we get to that, I do, if you'll indulge me, want to just share in a moment with you. In fact, 49 seconds with you of silence to honor the 49 victims of Pulse. Thank you for allowing us that moment. Now, a lot of things have come out of Pulse. That could mean for some advocacy. For me, it meant leaving my career that I spent 13 years on to go to work fighting every single day for our community. New organizations sprang up that uplift the voices of LGBTQ young people and help to move us forward. But we've also seen some other really incredible things pop up. And one of those things that touches me all the time is the art that has sprung forth out of Pulse. Last year, I had the opportunity to go and see the Orange County Regional History Center's exhibit that showcased some of that beautiful art that has come out of Pulse. And it really showed me just how powerful and cathartic art can be. So when we put together this event, we definitely wanted there to be an artistic element as part of the program tonight. So I am really excited that we have a special treat. We have a couple of them tonight, but to get us kicked off tonight, I'd like to welcome to the screen a friend and fellow Pulse survivor and also a beautiful vocalist, Brian Reagan.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows and what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions, and rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know we're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that every wish would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star. Somebody thought of that and someone believed it. Look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? And what do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. We know that it's probably magic. Have you been half asleep? And have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound, the call of young sailors? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm meant to be. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Wow, I'm a little emotional. As I think many of us are. I just thank you to Brian, who will be back later with some more music. But I think there is no better way to set the stage and the tone for what we're here for tonight than to share in a song together. So really grateful for Brian. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing the next piece. Outside of art, I did mention that advocacy and organizations were a huge part of what came in the aftermath of Pulse. There was a lot that went into the effort to bring the Orlando community together in the wake of the shooting. If you watched the news, you might not see all of the groups that were coming together to lift people up. But the next group we're going to talk to, I'm really excited about, is a group that started as a loosely related collaboration of LGBTQ organizations just trying to meet the immediate needs of survivors like myself, of family members, in the immediate aftermath of Pulse. And now they've grown into a true force to be reckoned with, to ensure that LGBTQ voices are at the table where decisions are being made. So it is with my great pleasure and distinct honor that I would like to welcome to the screen Executive Director of the One Orlando Alliance, Jennifer Foster. How are you?
Hi, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Jennifer?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a little emotional after hearing that song also. And, Rainbow Connection is one of my favorite songs, and I don't think I've ever heard it performed more beautifully or with more meaning than hearing Brian just perform that. So, yeah, taking a moment just to really take that all in. And I want to thank you, Brandon, for those 49 moments of silence. It's really important to never forget and to always stay grounded in why we do this work. And we have a reminder every day that 49 lives were taken and hundreds were injured and wounded physically, mentally, emotionally. Thousands of people in our community were affected and people all over the world. So, taking that 49 moments of silence is really important. I also want to just acknowledge something that's also heavy on my heart right now, and that is what you open with. And I appreciate you acknowledging the tough time that is going on in our community, our country, in particularly our Black community, our Black trans community, being just really at the center of systemic racism, and something that we need to solve and we need to work on. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about what we're going to do and what we have done here in Central Florida around that. But I just wanted to kind of acknowledge those things before we start and recognize that, I know you're in the middle of a lot of these, you're at the intersection of a lot of these issues. And so I honor you for the work that you do. And I thank you for the work that you do in these spaces. So
yeah. Thank you so much. And I am really excited to talk about, how the current national dialogue is shaping the work that we're doing. But before I get too far down the road, I think that there are probably people on the line who don't know a lot about the One Orlando Alliance. And I gave them a little sneak preview, I guess, a little tidbit of the formation of the One Orlando Alliance. But I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about, what prompted the launch of the Alliance, and then, what are some of the things that help to galvanize the group in the aftermath of Pulse?
Sure. So, like everyone in the community, we were completely shaken to the core on June 12th, 2016. And there was a group of LGBTQ community leaders who started talking. We said we really need to bring together our organizational leaders in the community so that our organizations are communicating and collaborating, because there was a lot of chaos going on, if you remember, and there was a lot of gaps in services and a lot of overlap and redundancy. And so we said, let's just bring everybody in the room. And there was a lot of misinformation out there too. So we said, let's bring everybody in the room with the people that are kind of running the show here, if you will, right? The city, the county, the federal government folks, and all of our community members that we could identify. And the sole goal was to communicate and collaborate. We weren't thinking about forming an alliance. There wasn't a kind of a long-term objective. It was really, how can we help our community heal right now? And how can we really focus on making sure that our community is really wrapping our arms around and supporting the family members, the survivors, the first responders, and all of those that were, reacting, and really, harness some of this incredible energy that we had here. Because, we'll talk a little bit about the love and kindness movement, but I think that was the thing that kind of propelled us. It got us through the tremendous pain that was going on, was this sense of love, the sense of kindness, the sense of supporting each other. So June 16th, 2016 was our very first meeting. We had 18 organizations that were originally part of it. Today we're at 43 organizations that serve the LGBTQ plus community. So we've grown, and it's been a really interesting process to be a part of. It's 4 years in the making. We have a long way to go, and every day it becomes more and more apparent that we have really deeper work to do. But I'm excited to kind of share some of what we have done in that time with you.
Yeah. Well, I just want to call out, and for folks who are watching, I mean, you got to think about what the world looked like on June 16th. And, it was, the best way that I can describe it to people was like standing in the center of a hurricane, right? And it's almost as if the world you're living in your 2-foot square radius is calm, but it's everything around you that feels like it's moving a million miles a minute, right? And so there's that kind of climate on the outside. And here's this, gaggle of organizations that are pushing through all of that, drowning out all of the noise to sit at the table, a table that they had not ever convened before, and say, what can we do for people? And for me, that's a real testament to, who Orlando is, right? And who we've become after Pulse. I think Orlando Strong and One Orlando, those things define our community now. And they're the reason that I couldn't imagine myself honestly living anywhere else. So hats off to you, and hats off to the organizations that joined so quickly to jump into the fire, really, to help lift up survivors and families and the community.
It really has been a collective effort of a lot of really committed individuals. And, I get calls all the time from people saying, how did the Alliance start? How can we do that here? And what I say is, I hope you never have to be in that situation where everyone had to come together and really put their walls down. I hope that that's something that you can organically do without a tragedy, right? So start now, and here's what you can do. And you can start by creating a list in your community of who your organizations are and just get to know each other, because there were two really revealing things on that very first day we met. Number one was a lot of those leaders in the room didn't know each other. And for a community the size of Orlando, for organizational leaders to not know each other within the LGBTQ plus community was really interesting, right? And so there's a lot of relationship building, a lot of trust building that had to happen, a lot of, really getting people out of their silos and working with each other, where in some cases, maybe there had been competition before, maybe there had been, leftover drama, somebody had left one organization and gone to another, all that stuff that gets in the way. What we said in that meeting is none of that is relevant anymore. We have got to be better. We need to be a better community. We need to commit to each other. We need to commit to our community members. We need to commit to the 49 lives that were lost and everybody that was affected, that from here on out, we do better. And everybody stepped right into that space immediately, which, is a really beautiful thing. The other thing that was really revealing was who was not at the table. We looked around and we said, who's not here? And we recognized immediately that our community of color, so our Black, our brown, our communities, and our trans communities were not visible. They were not present. So there may have been an individual in the room, but the community representation from the Black and the brown community and the trans community in particular, we said the African-American, the African-American, the Black, the Caribbean, the Hispanic, Latinx communities, not present, and our trans community. If you think about who was really most affected by the Pulse tragedy, it's those things. And there weren't organizations to represent those sectors of our very diverse community. And so that's something that we've been consistently working on. We have a tremendous way to go there, a long way to go there. But I can tell you we are miles and miles and miles ahead of where we were 4 years ago.
That's awesome. And again, hats off to you and representation, so key when we call out, who is not at the table. That's one of those things that we've got to be doing as a community, that we've got to be doing as organizations as we move forward to make sure that justice is the lens that we're looking through. So I do want to talk a little bit, because you kind of nibbled at it there around some of the things you've been able to accomplish. But if you could just share, what are some of the highlights over the last 4 years that the One Orlando Alliance has been able to accomplish?
I think the biggest thing really is that we created something called the Alliance Agenda, and we outlined the top 10 initiatives that our organizations will work on together. So these are community-centric issues that we're all committed to. And those issues are youth, workplace equality, healthcare, coming out, vulnerable populations, transgender, non-binary, gender diverse populations, hate crimes, immigration, and racial inequity. And we're making strides in all of those areas. But I'll tell you, these last couple of weeks, we really looked at racial inequity and we said, we put it in this agenda 2 years ago almost. And what have we done? And we really had to do some real deep self-examination on this and commit to doing better. And so, we'll be putting out, we just finished our statement today. And if you can imagine what it's like for an organization of 43 organizations to make a statement, it took a little while, but it's not about making a statement. It's about what are we committed to do? What's the action that we are going to take? What's the measurable action that we are going to hold our members accountable to around racial equality? And one of the things we decided right off the bat, and this is the first place we're saying it publicly, is that we've changed that language, because language is important, right? So we've changed racial inequality to anti-racism. And so we've taken a very firm stand on anti-racism, and we're going to do some work. We met all weekend, actually, on Friday, and a special meeting on Sunday to talk about these things as a coalition and say, this isn't just One Orlando Alliance. One Orlando Alliance is 43 member organizations all banded together, right? And so when you think about a paradigm shift, like how you shift a culture of a community, we started that after Pulse. Here's another pivot that we have to make, right? And we're going to continuously, because we're all human beings, we're going to continuously kind of have to pivot on some things and have to learn and have to grow. And when you can acknowledge those things, then that's where, you know, the magic happens, right? And so that's where that's the work that's currently going on. But you know, we've done some great things. Recently, the City of Orlando just awarded us the 2020 Diversity and Inclusion Award from the City of Orlando for the work that we're doing collectively with our government, our corporate, our government, and our philanthropic communities. We're working in all kinds of spaces where there weren't LGBT folks at the table before. So whether it means that we're helping make sure that some of our leaders sit on certain boards or advisory councils, or they're in spaces where they're in philanthropic spaces where they weren't recognized before, you know, those are all things that are really important when you think about representation and getting folks from our community with lived experience to be in places and have their voices heard for their authentic selves. We're doing a lot of work around homelessness, LGBTQ plus homelessness. We support some youth initiatives. We're developing a workplace equality program. So there's a lot of things that we've kind of got our hands in. And this is all work from our coalition members. You know, our coalition members, there's no membership fee, but the fee really to be a member is to be engaged in the work. So, you know, pick an area that is really important to you and dig in, because all of these issues that I mentioned, what we want to do is get to the root cause of some of those problems. And many of our member organizations are incredible. All of our member organizations are incredible. But what they're doing in a lot of cases, because of limited resources, limited time, you know, all of that, they're treating symptoms to bigger problems, right? And so what we can do collectively is really examine, like, what's at the root of those problems, you know? So when it comes to I don't want to pick one specific issue over another, but we have organizations that are kind of collectively working on particular initiatives, but when they band together, then we can talk about policy change. Then we can talk about where do we need to put pressure on who and where, and how can we really move the needle. So, you know, our goal is always, I think, as nonprofit leaders, is to put our nonprofits completely out of business, because there's no need for us anymore, right? I mean, we want to solve all of these problems. We're in this world to help fix things. And provide service to folks. And so, you know, we want to reduce the need for a lot of the services that are provided in our community, and be able to just support our community in a way that's meaningful and allows people to really thrive. We have a lot of people really struggling in our community, and that's apparent through COVID. You know, the LGBTQ plus the Central Florida LGBTQ plus Relief Fund was started as a, in conjunction with Contigo Fund. The center is doing the distribution on that. Q Latinx is really supporting that, as well as the Bros and Convo initiative has recently joined. And the goal really is to get direct assistance and mutual aid assistance. So if anybody's watching this now and they want to know how to help our community right now, you can make a donation to the LGBTQ Central Florida Relief Fund. But those are things like we're actively engaged in. And so there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, and I love, I know I see Desiree in the comments shouted this out too. I love what you said around the member fee, right? There isn't a member fee. The member fee is being committed to doing the work. And that's why I've been so honored to work alongside the One Orlando Alliance and through Equality Florida, right? Is that the membership fee for this moment right now is to be willing to get your hands dirty. It's also to be willing to be introspective and reflect on the work that you're doing and who's at the table and who's, not at the table. And so I just, I appreciate you calling that out, that right now, and I think this goes for all of us, right? If you're tuning in right now, I see almost 130 of you are on the line right now. Every single one of you should be asking yourselves, am I willing to get my hands dirty? Am I willing to dive in and do the really hard work? And especially as we talk about, to your point, Jennifer, racial justice as a lens, it's one thing to be able to put a black square on Instagram, which is great, and representation matters and allyship really matters, but it's about what do you do next, right? And how do you actually assess the way you're showing up in the world every single day? And what are you going to do differently tomorrow than what you're doing today? So I just really appreciate you calling that out. And I appreciate you sharing with us, some of the things that you've been up to, some of the things the Alliance has been up to, and some of the things you kind of got on your radar. I think, if you could boil it down, I know you've got sort of the 10 areas in the agenda that you talked about focusing on, but if you could boil it down for us, what do you feel like the greatest need right now, 4 years after Pulse, is in the Central Florida LGBTQ community?
All 10 of them. Truthfully, all 10 of them are needed right now, or they wouldn't be prioritized in the way that they do. Really the anti-racism focus and the commitment is where we are centered at this point. Because that affects everything, right? Because if our organizations aren't accessible to Black and Brown people, if we don't have representation on boards, if there's not representation within organizations, then we're failing a big portion of our community. And so the commitment to many, and we know lots of organizations need to do a lot of work, including the Alliance. It's true. We are not as inclusive as a community as we want to be. And I think that's something we've talked about for a very long time, is that, we're a very diverse community, but Paul showed us we're not always inclusive. And that's a learning journey that we're all on, and it's something that takes deliberate, intentional work, and it's very introspective, and but it's the work that we're committed to do as leaders. So I have to lift the anti-racism as the most important work today, and we'll continue, right? And when we talked earlier about measurable impact, the proof's in the pudding, right? So we have to be able to say, here's where we are today, and here's where we'll be in 6 months from now, and here's where we'll be from a year from now. And those are the things we're working on. The other thing that is really important for us is LGBTQ plus homelessness, particularly in our trans community. We have a lot of individuals in our trans community, particularly our Black and Brown communities, who are experiencing homelessness or in situations where there's pretty significant housing instability. And so that's an area that is really a gap in our community, because there isn't an organization that focuses predominantly on that. So that's a space that we can step into to see if we can get that need filled in a way. And maybe there'll be an organization that comes out of that work that we do collectively. Who knows? But that's a real big issue in our community. I want to give a shout out to Equality Florida for the work that, all the work that you do, really. But one of the huge gaps has been our gender equity, also our transgender community, our non-binary community, and our gender non-conforming community really haven't had places to convene, to work on issues together. And I see a lot of that work happening from different individuals, and a lot of that leadership training, and a lot of that mentorship, and a lot of that direction and guidance is coming from Equality Florida. So I want to just give you a shout out, because y'all do a lot of really great work, but also saw that real deep gap, real wide gap in our community, and have been putting a lot of work there. So that's something that we're certainly have been heavily committed to for the past few years, and will continue to be. So the goal is for organizations or initiatives to pop up so that all of this can be led by people with lived experience, right? Representation and lived experience is so important. And so the goal is, and whoever's watching out here who says, here's a problem, how can you be part of the solution is my question. How can you step into this space? Because there's no better fixer of things than somebody that has experienced it firsthand, whatever it is. We don't need people from the outside, people that don't look like us, people that don't, making decisions for us, right? And that happens all the time. And so how can we have more organizations that are led by and for all of our very diverse community sectors, right? And that's the thing, we are so diverse. We're every age, we're everything, right? And so But our goal really is to make sure that we are creating a cultural transformation in Central Florida where every LGBTQ resident and visitor feels safe, feels included, and has the ability to thrive here.
Yeah, and that really is the goal. And again, I just, I appreciate you and want to bring us back to this thought, right? And I'm imagining myself on June 16th. Honestly, I don't even know if I can remember what I was doing on June 16th. There was just so much going on, right? And our community really felt like the epicenter of a lot. It was the center of a hurricane, as I described. And just to think about, convening these 18 organizations at that time, and then, bringing that 4 years forward, and there's 10 initiatives and tackling homelessness and, making sure that Black and brown voices are at the table. And so I just really appreciate you calling out all those things, and I'm in awe of the work that has progressed over the last 4 years. We've got folks in the comment section asking, how do people contact? You can go to oneorlandoalliance.org. I think do you have a contact link on there that people can reach out through?
Sure. Yeah, I can put a link in there. But yeah, that's it. One Orlando Alliance. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I know that our team has been.
Michael's gonna do that. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael's on top of it. Our producers are
Michael.
here. I've got it handled.
I thought I was on Zoom for a second. I'm like, hold on, I'll pop that in the chat.
No, we've got it.
I'm happy to have Michael.
Yeah, we've got you all hooked up. So definitely, send a note, oneorlandoalliance.org, reach out to Jennifer, and make sure that you are, that you're connecting with the work. As we round out here, we got a couple of minutes left, Jennifer. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Acts of Love and Kindness movement. What is it? How do people get involved as we head toward the 4-year mark of Pulse?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon, for bringing that up. And as a Pulse survivor yourself, I know that this is a really tough time for you. And when we created the Acts of Love and Kindness movement, we hoped that it would be some comfort to survivors and to family members and to our community. And I remember when we created this alongside the city of Orlando and Orange County, we were sitting in rooms saying, what do we want people to feel? What do people need to feel on June 12th? And we said, as sad as June 12th, 2016 was, there was also so much beauty. And so this shouldn't be sorrowful. It should be a remembrance, right? And it should be respectful, and it should honor the 49 that were taken and all that were affected. But let's focus on the love and the kindness that was shown. And so we came up with the Acts of Love and Kindness movement, and that starts 49 days in advance of June 12th in honor of the 49. And it culminates on June 12th, which is Orlando United Day. And so what we ask people to do in those 49 days is to act, to love, or to give in whatever way is meaningful to them. And that can look different for everybody. But we say the act is, volunteer for an organization, buy coffee for the person, behind you, smile at a stranger, hold the door for someone, just, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Just do something that is showing kindness to the world, and maybe to yourself. Sometimes you have to give kindness to yourself, and so So Act, Love, Give. Love is, we want you to share that on social media because, you know, love is contagious. And so we want that to just get out there. So use the hashtag Act, Love, Give. And then give is support an organization or a cause that is meaningful to you. So that could be volunteering, that could be making a donation, you know, that could be talking about an organization in your circles of influence, but just elevating the goodness that happens in our community because there's so much good here. And so that's really what the movement was intended to do, and it's a little different this year. Well, it's way different this year, right? Because most of our events all of our events that are specifically for Act, Love, Give are virtual this year, including the One Pulse Foundation Remembrance, which happens on June 12th, and 49 Bells, which happens on June 12th. All of that is going to be virtual this year because of COVID-19. But there are ways that we can gather, just like we are here. You know, if we were meeting at a restaurant or a club or something tonight, I'm not sure how many people are on right now, but I don't think we'd have this many people in the room, right? So there are ways that we can adapt to this, and we can still remember, we can still honor. And you know, it's a heavy time for our entire community. There's no doubt about it. And through that is love and unity, and being you know, being really really true to our commitment of supporting each other, and our love for community, and our just honoring each other, right? I think that's the only way that we can make it through these times. And so yeah, that's it. I'm reading Michael saying, wrap it up, Jennifer.
Our producers here in our ear, like, okay, we got it. No,
I'm like, I should wrap this up here. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's important. We should never forget this. And 4 years from now, you know, it's been 4 years, and we've changed so much, and we've grown so much, and we're so much more united, and we're such a stronger community than we were 4 years ago. And yet there's still a lot of work that has to be done. So hopefully everyone that's watching will join in that. We'll support Equality Florida. We honor them with Action program. That's a beautiful, beautiful way to really put our intent into action. So thank you for having me, Brandon. And my heart is with you over the next few days. And my heart is with all of you the next few days and onward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for all the work that you are doing. Our heart is with you as well, and we are definitely in it to act, love, and give this week. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Wow, there is so much incredible work being done. And I do want to center us on this lens a little bit before I bring on our next guest, on this conversation of race and who's at the table and who's not at the table. You know, I said their names earlier, but the unfortunate thing is that just a handful of names isn't it. This problem with systemic racism and hate violence and bigotry goes deep into who we are as a nation. And that's why organizations like the One Orlando Alliance, organizations like Equality Florida, really have to take that introspective look and ask ourselves, how are we showing up differently today than we did yesterday? And Equality Florida is committed to leading the charge. In the last week, we've gathered over 800 organizations around the country, LGBTQ organizations, that have said firmly that Black lives do matter, and that we are going to put all of the effort and energy that we've put into every fight for justice so far into the fight for racial justice as well. We hosted a town hall with the Human Rights Campaign, the National Center for Lesbian Rights. We had Minnesota City Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins on, an out trans Black woman. We also had civil rights attorney and LGBTQ candidate for the State House of Representatives in Michelle Rayner. We had a dialogue around what it actually means to sit at the table, what it means moving forward for LGBTQ voices to put all of that stonewall oomph behind the fight for real justice. I think the reality is racial justice is not just an adjacent mission or a nice to have in the work that we're doing. Racial justice is a lens through which we see the work of fighting against hatred and bigotry every day. The fight for equality means equality for all. And so I just want to say loudly and clearly, as a Black queer man living in America, that means saying unequivocally that Black lives really do matter. If you want to check out more on the work that we've done in the last couple of weeks, and of course, spanning back before that, you can go to lgbtqblacklivesmatter.org. You can check out our letter there that 800 organizations have signed on to. You can also go to our Facebook and YouTube pages and take a look at that town hall that I talked about. It was a fabulous conversation. I encourage you, carve out a little bit of time, get out your smart TV or your Apple TV and put it on the big screen, kick back and watch a fabulous conversation. These are the dialogues that we've got to be having. I don't need to tell you this, and to help introduce our next guest, I do not need to tell you that no matter how much we protest, no matter how much we rally, no matter how much we demand our voices be heard, none of it matters if we do not have elected officials that are our allies in the fight. That's why our elections are so important. That's why our programs to go to Tallahassee, to demand justice, to demand change, to demand that we be heard are so critical to the work that we do. And so I do want to talk a little bit about Equality Florida and our plans to continue to do that work in Tallahassee and in our elections program. And to help me do that, I'd like to welcome to the screen Equality Florida Senior Political Director, Joe Saunders. Joe, how are you?
Hello, Brandon. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's great to see you virtually. I'm loving your virtual office.
Well, it's a physical office too, also.
I wasn't sure, is this like a Zoom background or are we getting a real background?
It's not a Zoom background, it is real. My mind and body are here in Miami Beach, and my heart is in Orlando with you and everybody who I know is bracing for impact in that hurricane this week that I know folks in Orlando feel specifically right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for making some time. I want to get to the election. You know, I love an election roast. I won't even say his name out loud. I'm not invoking him on this town hall tonight. You all know who I'm talking about. 1,500 Black Lives Matter Plaza. Okay. But I'm not going to invoke him, but I am going to say, I love an elections conversation. I love to talk about the work of putting allies in office. But before we get there, I wonder if you could just tee us up a little bit, frame up the work that Equality Florida has been doing since Pulse, and really how has our agenda or mission changed over the last 4 years?
Sure, and that's a big question. And so I don't know that I don't know that we'd have time to speak to all of that work, but there's a couple of places that I would go to highlight. I mean, you've already, in the conversation that you've had with Jennifer, you've talked a lot about how Equality Florida's pivoted, how Equality Florida worked in response to the tragedy at Pulse 4 years ago. I heard you talk about our mission to, we sort of set two goals, right? First and foremost was do everything we could do to support the survivors and to support the families of those we lost. And that involved raising money, that involved providing support, that involved investing in the infrastructure that folks like Jennifer are helping to sustain on the ground. But it also meant doubling down on our mission and auditing that mission and taking a look at it, taking a look at where we were spending time and which lenses we were bringing to the work. And so there are a couple of things that I would highlight from that I think are important and powerful. And for those folks who are watching who were there and have been a part of Equality Florida from its founding, were a part of leaning into the response work around Pulse, and are with us here today, because I see from the comment thread that there are folks watching right now who... Yeah,
you've got a lot of fans in the comment thread, to be honest. That's what I'm seeing. I didn't know you were going to be more popular than me on this broadcast. We're shutting it down. That's it. It's over.
But a couple of the programs that I would elevate that I think have been so impactful, first and foremost, following the tragedy at Pulse and following, I think, the global LGBTQ rights movement, but specifically the American LGBTQ movement's assessment and acknowledgement that gun violence is an epidemic that our community disproportionately is impacted by, and our engagement just headfirst into the gun safety policy, gun violence prevention space has been really, really important. And one of the first steps that we took as an organization was to become a founding member of the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. And while we could spend an hour, or more just talking about that work, I did just want to share and lift up how important building that infrastructure has been. It wasn't long after the Pulse tragedy that another tragedy hit Florida, and it was here in South Florida where I'm from, and not too far away from where I am in Miami now, the tragedy at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, which I know, Brandon, you have been a big part of building and organizing responses to too. But I don't know that people know that it was Equality Florida's public policy director that was standing in Tallahassee at midnight to welcome the bus of Parkland students who had stormed the state capitol following the tragedy at Stoneman Douglas High School. I'm not sure that people really are connected to just how on the ground we have been and how our infrastructure was ready and able to receive those students as they, again, transformed the conversation around gun violence in America. So that has been a really important space for us. And and that led to the launch of the No NRA Money campaign, which I know a lot of folks here have been a part of who are watching today, and really just knocking the National Rifle Association back on its heels as we grab the conversation and force them to be held accountable in a way that they really haven't been for decades in Florida and around the country. A second program that I would elevate that I know you and I have talked about a lot is Equality Florida's Safe and Healthy Schools Project, which was another program that was launched almost, right after the tragedy at Pulse. And it was our way of acknowledging that in order to fully uproot bigotry and hatred and the beginnings of the birthings that become hate-motivated violence, that we really had to tackle it right at its core, which is when people are really young. I was a victim of bullying when I was growing up. I know a lot of us were, and we can see how it breeds and festers in an environment that all of us are touched by, which is our public school system. So the launch of that program has been transformational. Tens of thousands of senior level faculty and staff and administrators in school districts all across the country have been touched by programs that have come from that. And then finally, I would just lift up a program and campaign that I know you are very familiar with. In fact, you are leading for us this year, which is the Honor Them with Action campaign. Our way of really pushing back on the idea every year as we approach this annual remembrance that thoughts and prayers for those we lost at Pulse or those we lost at Parkland or the Black lives we've lost to systemic racially motivated violence, thoughts and prayers aren't enough. And I think Honor Them with Action, which will launch, and I know we're going to talk about more in a second, will launch this Friday again for the 4th time. It names that, and it says if you really want to honor those you've lost, those we've lost together, honor them with action. Take action with us today. And this year, we're very excited to roll out that our theme is honor them with action, make a plan to vote.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Obviously I have a personal tie to the Honor Them with Action campaign, but I think you hit it, right? That our promise, much the same as my promise was to my best friend, was that we were going to do something to change the world. And when you say that to people, they might scoff or laugh or pat you on the shoulder or whatever that is. But when you say it and you really mean it and you put action behind it, it's powerful to watch organizations like Equality Florida truly change the world. And our Safe and Healthy Schools program is absolutely doing that. Our partnership in gun violence spaces is absolutely doing that. And the fact that we have an Honor Them with Action campaign that reaches 200 million people this year, I mean, I don't know. Can Donald Trump tweets reach 200 million people? I don't know. But really, for me, that's the power and the magic of bringing us together. So I know you touched on it a little bit, and I appreciate you kind of taking us on this framing journey. But I wonder if you could just share, given what has already happened, given 4 years of work, how now is the conversation around systemic racism changing, shaping, reshaping the work that we're doing, or is it not?
So that's a big question. And it's a question that deserves a lot of thought and a lot of discussion. And one of the things that I think that we're doing really well right now as an agency is actually something you mentioned in the introduction, or sort of bringing me on stage, is convening LGBTQ spaces for the purpose of talking about this. And I know you mentioned the letter. One of our first responses as an agency to the murder of George Floyd was to begin to launch this conversation, to do it in the form of an open letter. So we built an open letter for LGBTQ organizations who were willing to stand together united to combat racial violence. And I know that link is going to be shared by our producing team, by Michael, with folks who are watching now. I just wanted to, I thought, Brandon, it would make sense to just lift up one part of it as a way of answering this question. And, so this letter that has now been signed by over 800, this letter drafted by Equality Florida in partnership with many of our national partners, has been signed by over 800 LGBTQ organizations. And it reads, "We, the undersigned, recognize we cannot remain neutral, nor will awareness substitute for action. The LGBTQ community knows about the work of resisting police brutality and violence. We celebrate June as Pride Month because it commemorates in part our resisting police harassment and brutality at Stonewall in New York City and earlier in California when such violence was common and expected. We remember it collectively as a breakthrough moment when we refused to accept humiliation and fear as the price of living fully, freely, and authentically. We understand what it means to rise up and push back against a culture that tells us we are less than and that our lives don't matter. Together we join to say Black Lives Matter." I think, to answer your question more directly, pushing back on violence has been a part of the DNA of Equality Florida. Pushing back on hate-motivated violence has been part of what we've done since our founding. And there are examples, I think, along the way of even in just the last few years of where we've really heard that call. The fact that 7 transgender women of color, 7 transgender Black women in Florida were violently murdered over the last 2 years, and for a period we were leading the country in violence against Black transgender women, is just an example of moments that we've tried to run towards this fire. And that's not to say that there isn't plenty of really important work that we need to do internally. Let me name that. But I'm really proud right now of the fact that we have been able to sort of step into a leadership space of convening our entire community to fully center this experience right now, to be willing to kind of go back to our roots and go back to where we came from and say, look, Pride was a riot, right? Pride came from this need to push back on the expression of policing as an expression of systems of oppression, whether it be homophobic or anti-trans or racist rooted in white supremacy. And so I think we are still trying to figure out what's next, but we start from the space that say presence isn't enough. You can't just stand in the room. That's an important part of this, but then you have to do something. You have to honor with action people that we've lost. And I'm excited to help our team figure out in this context what that means.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, you've said it a couple of times, and obviously it's a little bit of my baby, so I'm excited to get to it. But can you talk a little bit about what that means? And I think there's 2 parts of the question for me, because you talked about the letter, right? You talked about convening over 800 national and state and local organizations around this work. But the question for me is, okay, so how do we galvanize folks, and what is our plan to honor them with action? What does that actually mean?
Well, let's pivot to the election, because I think that means a lot of different things, and I think that there are a lot of interesting.
You said election, and I need to
just get that little cocktail up.
I'm gonna sip my tea for the election.
There's so many interesting conversations that are happening right now, and I know just by looking at who's here, I see Donald Roop and Breno and Landon and other folks that I'm close with in Orlando who are here watching, and folks who have been out marching safely, socially distantly, marching for Black lives. I think every community is tackling this conversation differently, and different policy proposals are being raised. And I'll just elevate one as we pivot to the election. Miami just announced today that they're ready to have a very serious conversation around what civilian oversight of police would be. And that's a part of a coalition. And that work is being elevated from a coalition that we've been a part of for 3 years. Our Deputy Director Stratton Politzer sits in that space. And that's really exciting, even as other conversations around demilitarization of the police and other things are being lifted up. But a through line that connects all of us that I do think is worth bringing attention to right now, and that Honor Them with Action is intended to bring spotlight to, is how the elections will determine everything that comes next. If we really want to audit systems of power, if we really want to look at how entrenched systemic racism, systemic homophobia lives and breathes in our system, you inevitably will come back to a conversation around elections, around who the people are in power and which policies they support. And so we've got to name a couple of things. One, we have to name that we are a southern state here in Florida that has a long, horrible history of racist policies of voter suppression that specifically target communities of color with the intention of keeping them from the ballot.
Yeah.
That's one thing we have to name. And another thing we have to name is that in a COVID-19 world, a lot of the assumptions that we've made about how the election will work and who's willing to cast their ballot and the risk factors that people have to navigate all the time in order to cast their ballot are now in question. And so what we're thinking a lot about is how do we arm people who deserve the right to the ballot? How do we protect them from voter suppression tactics at the same time that we empower people with every tool that they need to cast their ballot in November? And for us, that means targeting 500,000 pro-equality voters who we really are unsure if they will cast their ballot if we don't talk to them, if we don't give them these tools and get them registered to vote by mail, get them registered to receive information about who the candidates are when the election comes, and make sure that we have everything we need in place to make sure that they know on election day how to get to their polling place or to cast their ballot from home.
Yeah. Well, hold on a second, because I feel like that was a drive-by of so much critical information that people need to dial in on. If you are watching right now, we've got 100 people still tuned in right now. If you're in the comments, you're giving likes and hearts and whatever, I want you to zero in on a couple of things that Joe just said, and they're really important. You know, this equality connection is about remembering pulse. It's about 4 years after the shooting. It's about what is the work that has been done, what is the work that we have left to do. In this moment together, we're saying that Equality Florida is ready to honor the victims of Pulse with action by targeting 500,000 pro-equality voters that might not be able to turn out if not for our efforts. That is a massive, massive, massive thing, right? And we know, I mean, I don't have to tell you, Joe, that elections are on a razor's edge in Florida, right? We have the governor that we have because of what, 30,000 votes? We have the senator that we have because of 10,000 votes. We have the president we have because of 100,000 votes in the state of Florida. So when you're talking about 500,000 pro-equality voters that are right there for us to capitalize on, that Equality Florida has zeroed in on, and then we talk about an elections program that's going to help them not only show up in August for the primary in November for the general election, but also not let anyone stand between them and the ballot box, that we're going to help them get their ballot in the mail. That's revolutionary. I could not think of a better way to honor the life of Drew, to honor the lives of all 49 victims of Pulse, than to have a mass wave of people turning out in August and November to make their voices heard. I just couldn't think of a better way.
Well said. And, you know, it makes me think of something that Nadine will talk about often. Nadine Smith, our CEO, for those learning about Equality Florida for the first time today. What Nadine will often say is that those of us who live in Florida, and especially those of us who live in communities like Miami-Dade or like Orange County or anywhere in the I-4 corridor, the Central Florida part of the state, that we live in some of the most important political real estate in the country. Where Florida goes, the country goes. You resisted the urge to name Donald Trump, Brandon, but I
think his name slipped out of my mouth once, but I'm not going to take credit for that.
Yeah, and I can't. I don't think you can have a conversation around the election and not name the consistent stream of attacks that have come from this administration on LGBTQ Americans and around so many marginalized people. And if you're watching this, you have been called to the streets more than once because of this administration and policies that have come from it. We know that the Trump administration is actively working to remove and erode policies that protect our families that were passed under the Obama administration. We know that even as we speak, they are petitioning the Supreme Court for the purpose of expanding discriminatory religious exemptions and protections that we've already won. We know that one of the first steps that the Trump administration took was to ban transgender people from serving in the military just a few years after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So the future of LGBTQ experience and the future of Black Americans experience and the future of immigrant experience in the country, and the list goes on, is dependent on what people in West Miami-Dade County and downtown Orlando do or do not do when November comes. And so it's true. It's not just a catchphrase. We live in some of the most important political real estate in the country. And in a state where the presidency is won or lost here, and therefore the country by 100,000 votes, 500,000 pro-equality voters that we have the opportunity with the launch of Honor Them with Action to engage, to empower, to armor up, to weather a COVID-19 world and cast a ballot is transformational, and it's something that it's worth all of us investing time and energy into.
Yeah, and what I want to name for folks who are watching, because the biggest thing I think with these virtual events and these conversations people walk away with is, okay, so now what? What do I do? How does this relate to me? And basically what Equality Florida is saying is that we've got an infrastructure in place. If you go to honorthemwithaction.org right now, you can click on Make a Plan to Vote. And there are all the steps you need right there to make sure your registration is up to date, to get your ballot in the mail. And then if you're all set, you're ready to go, to sign up to get your pro-equality voter guide, to make sure you're educated on the issues and you can share with your friends and family. And then on top of that, you can go in and click volunteer, and you can get in on this infrastructure to help turn people out in August and November. So the foundation is there. And I don't know if I can really share this because our press release is not out yet, but what people may not understand is 500,000 seems like a nebulous number, right? And it is a huge number. The reality is this year, 4 years removed from Pulse, we are honoring the victims of Pulse with Action by launching our largest elections program in organization history. And again, I can't think of anything more fitting to honor the victims, to honor Drew, to honor the other 48, than to launch the largest elections program ever, to say, absolutely not, you will not keep us from the ballot box in August or November. We will turn out in droves, we will be heard, and substantive change is on the way. So I keep coming back to that, but it's so important to call out, if you could just a little bit into the nuts and bolts without losing too many people, and you talk about what that elections program entails. How can people get plugged in? What's it going to look like?
Yeah, and let me go there. Well, let me just say that it will be the largest program that Equality Florida has ever run. And one more step than that, it will be the largest program that we believe any state equality organization in a presidential swing state in the country has ever run. That is the goal. That's what we're building towards. And so for those of you who are inspired, and those of you who donate by donating your treasure, that ask is coming. There are going to be moments where we're going to need your help and your investment in how we think about the Honor Them with Action program and the Turnout to Vote 2020 program. But for those of you who right now are wondering how you can really lean in, I want to point you to that. And so our helpful production team is going to throw a few links up in the comment thread, but we're launching our 2020 election program on Friday, on the 4-year remembrance of Pulse, with a day-long Honor Them with Action Day of Action. And so what that's going to look like on Friday is a moment where we train you with all of the skills and techniques that you need to engage in what we call a peer-to-peer texting program. In Florida right now, you can register to vote online. You can also register to vote by mail online, which we know dramatically increases the likelihood that someone who wants to vote will vote if you get that vote in the mail, especially in a COVID-19 world. And so we're recruiting captains of equality to join our Honor Them with Action campaign and the Turnout 2020 effort into a day of action on Friday. One of the ways we're going to help you get all the skills and techniques and strategies that you need is actually to invite you to a happy hour that we're going to host on Thursday night. For those of you who know Wes Davis, our field director, he will be hosting a campaign happy hour. I see him on the thread. So come join me and Wes and others on Thursday night to hear more detail than we're able to give you here about what it'll mean to be a part of our 2020 election program.
I will also be there. You can't miss me with a happy hour. You had me at a happy hour.
Yeah, exactly. Brendan will be making an equality teeny for all. Shipped to you via Amazon, I'm sure. But come hang out with us on Thursday. There will be a link in the comment thread to come learn more about the entire program. And if you can't do that, if you're busy on Thursday night, if you can give us 2 hours just to engage in this texting program, it's all done through the web. It's done through your Safari or through your web browser. We can train you very quickly. But our goal on Friday is to reach 30,000 pro-equality voters of Black and Brown experience, voters whose communities have been historically targeted by racist voter suppression laws, tried in so many different ways to be kept from the ballot. We're going to target our pro-equality voters who are Black and Hispanic first to ensure that they hear from us, that they get information about how to register to vote, that they get information about how to vote by mail.
Yeah, that's great. And just for folks who are watching, you've gotten a couple of links in the comments section, so please check it out. You've got an RSVP link for the happy hour. Again, that's the training session. You can come and have a equalitini with me and learn how to use our system, learn how to get plugged in. And then, of course, on Friday, we've got our Honor Them with Action Day of Action, which is we've got shifts all day long where you'll be dialed into our peer-to-peer texting program. You'll be helping people sign up to get their ballot in the mail. This is how we truly make change. So I see folks asking in the comment section, how do I get involved? How do I get engaged? That's the way. Sign up tomorrow to be there. Tomorrow, what is today? Tuesday? Sorry, sign up Thursday for the happy hour. And then, of course, Friday, join us for our Honor Them with Action Day of Action. And we'll keep those links coming to you. So, Joe, I just want to, kind of take us a little bit maybe broader, right, than this nuts and bolts on the elections program. Talk to us a little bit about what's at stake. It's easy for us to dial in on Donald Trump. It's easy for us to dial in on the Senate or, congressional races. But in terms of equality, right, and in terms of justice, what is really at stake, and why do those 500,000 voters matter so much more than one race here or there?
Well, that's a great question, and it invokes some of my own experience as a former elected official. I think some folks who are watching may know that for a moment I represented a portion of Orlando in the Florida House of Representatives, and it was there. Really before that, in my work with Equality Florida, but it was as a sitting member of the Florida House that I realized how essential it is to have and to grow support for LGBTQ rights and progressive policy in our state capital. We live in a federalist democracy. We live in a system where states are given enormous control, enormous power over the lives of Floridians, of everyday Americans. And so here in Florida, our state legislature and our governor's mansion and our state executive cabinet have incredible power over our lives and the policies that either restrict or provide opportunity. So when we think about the election, I think this is really important to say out loud. We're not just talking about the presidency. Certainly that is enough of a reason to armor people with the tools that they need to cast their ballot. But Equality Florida's election programs, which I have the privilege of helping to run, we are wide and deep in our analysis. We are looking at county commission chambers and city councils and school boards, the incredible impact of our engagement in school board races and the way that it's changed culture in entire school districts representing hundreds of thousands of students. So when we ask you to become a part of our program, when we put that equality captain crown on your head and you join our team, what we're really asking you to do is to help us to share this message, this analysis of where elected officials at all levels of the ballot are on the issues that we care about. And one last thing I'll just bring to you, Brendan. I think a lot of folks after marriage in the LGBTQ space, a lot of people thought, and I had conversations with Equality Florida donors and supporters who sort of thought, well, will this mean that we're done? Is this almost wrapped? And I think it's hard to be LGBTQ in Florida and think that for so many different reasons. I think the I think Pulse shows us that that's not true. I think this Black Lives Matter, this critical Black Lives Matter moment is showing us how that is not true. But another really important sign of that is in, last session, at the beginning of the Florida legislative session, there were 8 anti-LGBTQ bills that were filed by conservative or indifferent lawmakers in Tallahassee. Bills that, had we not been there, would not have been on folks' radar, and had they passed, would have grossly eroded protections that we've won or moved us back in so many different ways. It is essential that our state capitol be filled with folks who are ready to fight for us. And when we talk about the election, we're talking about, from the top of the ticket all the way down to the school board level, we're talking about electing people who will champion our community and our values and our families every step of the way.
Oh, sorry. We've got a hurricane going on out here. There's like fire trucks and ambulances, so I didn't want to distract from your really important point. And I just, I really appreciate you putting it in perspective for us, because I think sometimes we can get lost, right? And as I think about us remembering 4 years since Pulse, as I think about us talking about honoring the victims with action, we can get lost in these day-to-day moments. And to be honest, that's what Donald Trump does so well, right? Is drag people from one crisis to the next, so much so that we lose track of the big picture. But the reality is that we have everything at stake, to your point, that state level organizations, state level laws and protections are so critical in a democracy like ours. And that's why the work of Equality Florida is so important. That's why it is such big news to say that we are honoring the 49 victims of Pulse with action by launching our largest elections program ever. That's why it's so important for us to say that there are 500,000 pro-equality voters on the table right now that Equality Florida has committed to turning out in August and again in November. It's because of that larger frame. It's because of understanding what's at stake. That all of those things are so important. So I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing with everyone on the feed today. And I hope that all of them will take a chance to see you on Thursday and Friday for our training.
Absolutely, Brandon. And one more quick shout out. If you're just joining the thread now, come hang out with us on Thursday at 6 o'clock for an equality campaign happy hour to learn more about how you can get the skills that you need to be engaged with us, not just on Friday, but for the next 6 months until the election, next 5 months until the election. And if you haven't yet, take a look at the links that our production team will be throwing onto the feed. We have 3 shifts on Friday on June 12th for our Honor Them with Action Day of Action. We're going to be texting. It's super easy. You don't even have to be on the phone. You can be multitasking while you help us text hundreds of people to empower them with the tools that they need to get registered to vote and to vote from home.
I love that. So easy. I can do it from home and I don't have to face my fears of talking on a cell phone. So
introverts are welcome, Brandon. Yeah.
My social anxiety thanks you. So thank you. Thank you so much to Joe Saunders, our Senior Political Director, for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. And we are rounding out here, but I do want to leave you with a few thoughts. I know that people, again, always ask, what can I do? How can I help? The reality is that as we approach the 4-year mark of Pulse on Friday, it's a really difficult time for our community. It's already a time that's riddled with grief and pain, but all of that is being compounded by a global pandemic that has left over 110,000 people dead. It's being compounded by exploding unemployment and systems that are broken and unable to help people. And of course, it's being compounded by a confrontation, a much needed confrontation with our brutal systemic racism that has persisted over time and eats at our nation's fabric. But amidst all of that, despite all of those things that are compounding on the grief and the pain that I'm personally feeling this week, I also find a lot of strength. And I find strength in moments like this. I talked about this being a connection, and I appreciate people shouting out their names, where they're from, and their pronouns, because that's where I find the strength. I find strength in our community. I find strength in our resolve to press on. I find strength in, Words like Orlando Strong and One Orlando, those mantras that we adopted in the wake of Pulse that said that hate will never win here. I find strength in the work of organizations across Florida, organizations like the One Orlando Alliance and Equality Florida, that are committed to doing the difficult work of lifting people up when they get knocked down. I find a lot of strength in the millions of protesters, many who look like me, across the country that are demanding that their voices be heard. I find a lot of strength in the promise that Equality Florida and the team across the state made in the wake of Pulse. That promise to uproot hatred and bigotry and to fight for real justice for all of us. And perhaps I find the most strength in that quiet promise that I whispered to my best friend Drew as I let go of his casket that day, just moments removed from Pulse. The promise I made to never stop fighting for a world that he would be proud of. My ask of you tonight is really simple. If you believe in that strength, if you believe in those mantras, that we are Orlando Strong, that we are One Orlando, if you believe in the work of uprooting hatred and bigotry at its source, and if you believe in the vision of a world that honors the legacy of the 49 victims of Pulse, a world that Drew would have been proud of, then I'm just asking you to join us in honoring their lives with action. I'm asking you to go to eqfl.org and hit donate. Give whatever you can. Become a member. Pitch in 10, 20, 50 bucks, whatever you can. Give to the work of turning out 500,000 pro-equality voters in August and November. I'm asking you to be willing to join in on Friday and share your own message with hashtag honor them with action. Share what that means. Share why it's so important with your friends that they make a plan to vote ahead of the primary in August and then again in November. I'm going to ask you, if you believe in that vision of that world, to visit honorthemwithaction.org and make your own plan to vote. Make sure your registration is up to date. Please, please, please sign up to get your ballot in the mail. Sign up to get your pro-equality voter guide. And of course, click the volunteer button to make sure that you're signed up to work a shift. It's really going to take all of us. And of course, I'm asking you that if you believe in the vision of that world, if you believe in the work of uprooting hatred and bigotry, if you believe in honoring the 49 victims of Pulse with action, then I'm asking you to be heard and make sure those in your circle are heard as well. Because our work is not just to honor the victims of Pulse and the victims of hate violence across the country with thoughts and prayers or moments of silence, although this week will be full of those. Our work is to let their memories fuel our fight for justice, to let their lives be a legacy, and of course, to honor their memories with action. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to Jennifer, to talk to Joe, and to talk to all of you about how we can do this work together. And to end us, I promised you another song. I promise I won't end you on my speech. That's not the thing you want to end on. What you want to end on is the beauty that has come in the wake of Pulse, the art that has been our catharsis. So to close us out, I'd like to welcome back one more time my friend and fellow Pulse survivor with a special Pulse tribute, Brian Reagan.
Everybody's got pain inside, imaginary wounds they fight to hide. How can I hate them when everybody's got a pulse? I dream in a world that wants my soul, that tells me if I hate, I can control. But I don't believe it, I cannot conceive it. Everybody's got a pulse. Well, I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin. Everybody's got a pulse. Once again I hang my head to cry. I can't find the reason why they died. We will find the answers blowing in the wind. Everybody's got a pulse. Well, I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin. Everybody's got a pulse. Who you gonna hate now when there's no one left but you? Who you gonna gun down if you can't kill the truth? It's inside of us, it's inside the blood, it's inside our pulse. I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin. Everybody's got a pulse. I am human, I am love, and my heart beats in my blood. Love will always win underneath the skin. Everybody's got a pulse.